These are the Chat City interviews from 103.2 Preston FM.
Chat City on this Thursday morning, and my next guest is in the studio. It's author Christine Middleton, and Christine is a retired lecturer in English and Russian with a passionate interest in Lancashire witches. She was determined in her brilliant debut novel to emphasise that the witches were real people, not wicked or magical, but far more interesting and complex than that. And to talk about the book, The Witch and the Witch, I've just got the title wrong. The Witch and Her Soul is Christine with me now. So Christine, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
And lovely to meet you. So tell me a little about your retired lecturer. Has writing a book always been a passion? Have you written previous books? Although this is your debut novel, have you written books prior to retirement?
I've done very little writing, having had a full-time job and a large family, and it took retiring to really give me the chance. Obviously, I've written bits and bats through the years. In fact, my interest in the Lancashire Witches started when I was about 8, when I read Harrison Ainsworth's great novel, and I think that's quite an interesting beginning. It was during the war, and my parents were very nervous. They thought that the Luftwaffe were going to bomb Blackburn out of existence. So they bought a little chalet in the wilds of Wiltshire. And this was just a wooden bungalow with no mod cons whatever. And so my first introduction to witches, if you like, was reading this great novel by a wood fire, paraffin lamp, the real atmosphere. And I think that affected me forever, really.
I could just see the scene. I mean, I read the book a long time ago, but I would imagine if you're reading the book in that kind of environment, then you know it.
Yeah, and at 8 years old, it's really striking. And just really to answer your question, so immediately after that, I wrote a play for my junior school friends. The play never achieved production, but it was really my first serious attempt at writing, and so it took me from 8 till 80 to actually get the book published.
Oh dear. So when did you then sit down, or was the thought there for quite some time that you wanted to write this book before you actually did put pen to paper?
Yes, I think it was, but I think my interest in witches is, as somebody who's gone through feminism and so on, it's a constantly interesting thing, because it's not just about feminist issues, it's really also about persecution of marginalised people. So if you're interested in history and what's happening in the world, I mean, there's still terrible witchcraft things going on in Africa.
Yes, of course.
So it remains a very interesting subject. But I actually settled down to write it when I retired 20 years ago, and sent it around, and publishers said, yes, very nice, dear, no, thank you, and went back in a drawer for 20 years, and then I got it out about 3 years ago and rewrote it, and with some more success.
And as you mentioned, or as I mentioned in the introduction, lots of people maybe didn't realise that this is an actual story with real people.
No, absolutely, and it's very much been treated in a lot of fiction as a fantasy horror, really, and the women as, as various kinds of devils, concubines. But really, I have tried very hard in this book to stay accurate. It's fiction, and I've invented conversations, meetings, and motivations, but the actual facts are genuinely true. The characters, all the main characters, actually existed, and I've used a lot. What I think is particularly helpful in this, that there is an actual manuscript of the court proceedings, which in detail, which you can use, in fact, which a writer can use. And I, in the last bit of the book, I've concentrated on the trial itself, and leaned a lot on that source.
How difficult is it then to write the book with facts and with fiction? I mean, does one overplay the other? I mean, you've got the facts in your head, but then how do you get the fiction to write within that factual account of what happened?
When you're reading it, things jump out at you. I mean, particularly the Samlesbury witches. Their story is quite different from that of the Pendle witches, and the central sort of story, really, which I shouldn't give away the final ending, but as you read it, you read it in old-fashioned Elizabethan language, but you think, I wonder what he really thought, what she was really saying, what they really wanted. I think as you read the facts, you're trying to create a living story.
And do the characters come back to life in the writing? I mean,
Yes.
when you're do they
terrifically.
in a way do they take over? Do you kind of get to know them, to dislike any of them, to like some more than others?
Yes, all of that is what happens. When I rewrote it, instead of writing it as the know-all, third-person writer, I actually took the heroine and gave her the story to tell herself. And that was terrific fun, actually, because it meant I had to try and produce a language that could sound Elizabethan without being really archaic. And once she got the story, she ran away with it and improved it a lot. But it's also not just the main characters. There are some minor characters that, for example, in the book Judge Walmsley, who did exist, but I don't know whether he existed as I paint him, I absolutely have a faible for him very much. He represents a kind of touchstone of sanity in a world that was very insane, really, a world of wild persecution and mania. And the nice thing about it is that occasionally, as you're writing, your characters tell you something that you didn't know. And you think, oh, well, I didn't know that you were doing that all the time.
And that must be absolutely fascinating, but I would imagine that maybe it could give you sleepless nights.
I think it's just pleasure, really.
Yes.
Getting to know characters, yeah.
Yeah. And did the characters change? Given as you said that they, factual events, etc., did the characters change in the writing for you?
No, I think I seized on them when I was reading the facts, and the story emerged then. I don't think I much changed them once I'd started writing. I think I was a bit careful not to traduce anybody, because I was keen to have the book to be very accurate. In fact, Jane's father, Richard Sherburn, had a worse reputation than I give him. I mean, I just let him be a womanizer. In fact, there were all sorts of rather nastier suspicions about him, but I've tried to keep well away from upsetting any old family.
So how did you have to discipline yourself in writing the book? How long did the writing of the book take?
Well, the first time it took about 2 years, and the second time it took about 2 years to rewrite, I would say. I'm not very good at being disciplined, and also I rewrite a lot, so it does take a long time.
So in the rewriting, you mean there were things that you then revisited what you'd previously written, and you thought, well, I think I'd like to change that, so the story changed a little, or the character?
No, I don't think I did change the story or the characters. By then they were firmly locked into my brain. What I changed, I think, was the writing. I tried to get rid of some clumsy bits. What I had to do all the time writing it as an Elizabethan girl was to make quite sure that everything, the vocabulary, could have been used at that time. And sometimes it's surprising, you use a word and you think, I'm sure the Elizabethans had that, and it turns out it wasn't in around till the 18th century. So I spent a lot of time with the shorter Oxford English Dictionary dating the vocabulary.
Right.
But I enjoyed that as well.
I'm sure. And from the book that you read then when you were, was it 8 years of age?
Yes.
To the then writing of this book now, how similar are the stories or the things that you've discovered in the writing of your own book?
Well, I think completely different. When I was 8 years old, witches were witches with hooked noses and broomsticks and black cats, and and Harrison Ainsworth's book is just a great big melodrama. But then you grow up, you read a bit of history, and you come to understand a bit more about people. And I think not just I grew up in 50 years, but I think our society has grown up. I mean, we're much more compassionate to people who are very poor or disabled or deformed or even old. And so what you could accept 50 years ago, you wouldn't now. And now you would try and penetrate to what it really felt like to be an old woman or a young woman accused and caught in this terrible trap.
And during the writing of the book, did you visit the areas, etc., and go up to Lancaster, etc.?
Yes, we did. Yes.
That must have been. How did you feel in visiting the places and writing the book? Was there a kind of warmth about it?
Well, Lancaster Castle, of course, is a very frightening place.
Yes, of course.
And when you see the cell that the women were kept in, one of the women actually died before she was brought to court. That's horrific. But I think the thing that for me was always most atmospheric, because it still is atmospheric, is the Trough of Bowland, because it's such a fantastic road.
Yes.
It's beautiful, but it's frightening. It's even horrible in a way when you imagine a cart dragging those women up to the agony that they had in Lancaster Castle. So I can't drive the Trough of Bowland now without remembering those women. I'm sure.
And the book, of course, is out on sale now. Where can people find it?
Oh, well, Waterstones in Preston are very supportive, I might say. But it's also available on Amazon, Kindle and so on. I think also Smith's stock it. So it's easily available, actually.
Right. And plans for the future when it comes to writing?
I'm nearly finished another novel at the moment, but it's quite a different area of history. I'm writing about Flora MacDonald.
Right. And the history's always been a subject that you've been fascinated with?
Yes, I'm not a historian at all. My interest is always literature, but I really think the best stories are the stories that have already happened.
And the forthcoming book, is that also going to be around factual information
and
fiction?
It's got a bigger fantasy element than The Witch and Her Soul, because one of them, yes, it's much more fictional. When Prince Charlie was trying to escape the English forces and he took refuge in the Hebridean Islands, blank.
Yeah, that will come back, I'm sure.
Yeah. What was your question, actually?
I was just saying about the book that you're writing now. Is that also going to be factual with fiction associated?
Yeah. Well, the main character, the narrator in that, is fictional. What I was going to say was that when Prince Charles was trying to escape, the myth is that nobody ever betrayed him, although there was a huge price on his head. Well, my narrator is a traitor. There was a traitor, and I've invented him totally.
And within the witches, is there a narrator? Is the story told through the eyes?
The Witch and Her Soul?
Yes.
Yes, the principal character is the narrator, Jane Southworth, who was on trial at Lancaster, with the other two women from Samlesbury. She is the narrator, and when she has the book to tell, I think it becomes much more lively.
Right. So you're at the moment writing the next one, and again, I mean, how difficult is it to put that story together? If you're difficult at kind of disciplining yourself to write, do you write when the kind of mood takes you, or is it that something comes into your mind and you think, that would be just right to go into that paragraph or just fit into where I am with the story right now?
Life is a constant struggle to find hours to sit down. The telephone goes, the children come, even though I haven't got a job anymore and the children are grown up, I still find it difficult to find the time. But I couldn't say I'm disciplined. I wish I was.
And do you think, looking back in history now, have we made what I can't think of the word of the witches? I mean, have we fairly now represented what happened, and we've righted the wrongs of that time?
I think in history we have. I think there've been lots of historians who've looked at those events, but but in fiction, they're still being written about as, not in every case, but I mean there was a major book that came out last year, treating the women as foul, magical creatures, and treating the whole thing as still as magic. So
that still goes on. That is still
it's
kind
still
of a
there,
representation
yes.
of how people saw them in those days.
Yes, it still is. Well, I think it depends really whether you're looking at a book to give you some idea of what really the world was like, or whether you're writing a gothic horror or a vampire book or whatever. I mean, the two totally different styles, not just styles, but actually different things, different kinds of writing.
And you had a book signing, did you, once it was published?
Yes.
How did that go? Was that something quite nice to do?
Oh yes, that was lovely. Waterstones here in Preston who were, laid on a little launch. That was very, very nice, yeah.
So people can find the book. It's The Witch and Her Soul. It's out. Is it in paperback or hardback at the moment? So it's out in paperback and available, as we say, from Waterstones and on Amazon and Kindle. So lots of ways of being able to get hold of the book. So Christine, can I thank you for coming into Chat City this morning, and maybe we could get you to come back in once the next book is published. It would be lovely to talk about that.
Oh, well, that would be great. The Tailor's Tale.
Lovely. Okay, I shall hopefully see you soon then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the interviews as much as we have. Why not give us a tweet at Chat City BFM?